We will continue with another panel discussion. For the benefit of those who have just joined, our first panel discussion focused more on the opportunities and challenges of the digital era ahead. In contrast, now, our next panel will be discussing how we can anticipate the challenges that come with evolving communication technologies while implementing the necessary safeguards.
I will now like to introduce you to our panelists and moderator. Firstly, Fabiana Di Porto is Associate Professor of Economic Law and Technology at the University of Salento and Contract Professor of Innovation Law and Regulation at the LUISS University in Rome. Round of applause. Flavio Arzarello from Meta, who is a graduate in computer engineering from the Politecnico di Torino and is based in Rome. He has joined Meta, formerly Facebook, as Public Policy Manager for Italy, Malta and Cyprus in January 2021. Andrea Stazi is the Regulatory Affairs Lead for South Europe and Academic Outreach Europe at Google. He is also an Associate Professor of Comparative Law and New Technologies Law and Director of the INO Law Lab at the European University of Rome and Visiting Professor in Biotechnology Law at National University of Singapore. Rainer Schnepfleitner from Amt für Kommunikation currently heads the Office for Communications in Liechtenstein, where he is responsible for the regulatory frameworks of electronic communications, audiovisual media, signature and trust services and post. This discussion will again be led by Mr. Antoine Sciberras.
So, thank you, esteemed speakers. During this morning's intervention, we've seen how technology should serve us really well, but that unfortunately sometimes doesn't. And I was thinking about, for those who are familiar or remember, the Star Trek movie and the beam me up Scotty functionality, which converted you into a beam of light and moved you from Earth to space. Now, if that doesn't function well, I don't think the outcome would be a really nice one to have, because we wouldn't just lose audio connectivity, we would essentially lose some of our body. So that brings me to the topic of the second session today. Technological innovation is something which we as regulators need to facilitate and promote, but we also need to ensure that the necessary safeguards are in place such that the society and economy at large are protected from potential harms from these technologies. Now, my example might sound a little bit too extreme, but we do have technological innovations coming up like artificial intelligence and others, which may pose real harms and threats to society. And that is the topic we're going to discuss now. And I'd like to start off with a question to Andrea. As the economy and society start to realize the potential of innovative technologies, amongst which AI, but also distributed ledgers, what can be done to address distrust and replace such distrust with confidence and integrity?
Thank you, Antoine. Good morning, everyone, and thanks a lot to MCA and the CEO and all the team for inviting me. Very happy to be with you today. And we are hearing very interesting speeches today, and we know how much technology has changed our life. There is, along with that, as Antoine mentioned, there are big challenges and some threats. There is sometimes in the media and in the public debate a sense of distrust. We hear about big tech, big data, dominance, gatekeepers, all negative terms in some way that carry some fear as a feeling, like when a person sneezes right now in a toilet. But we had to face in some way this fear because I mean, at the same time, as people work in the field, we know how much technology and I mean, especially in the last 20 years, has changed our life since when I was younger. We know how many services, how many opportunities for connecting each other, better and better, not still perfectly, but better and better, and also for social and economic exchanges we have thanks to technology, and often for free, let's say. So to build confidence and to build integrity and to build finally trust, that's I think the common goal of the regulators, the companies, so the industry, and the users or consumers, because trust is the main pillar of information society and economy. We need awareness of this change and the impact of that. We shouldn't get the big opportunities that we have for granted, and we should remember which was the situation 20 years ago. How our life was 20 years ago without all these amazing services that we have now. The impact, at the same time, we should be aware of the impact on existing industries, on the media, existing media, on the existing, I mean, companies that face big challenges at the same time and should, I mean, in some way get digital. To get the opportunities without being damaged by them. And so we had to build a knowledge of the ecosystems, as mentioned earlier, because it's crucial. That knowledge helps to move over the fear. At the same time, for people, we need skills to use and also to control the technology, because even if companies build up the best tools in the world for transparency, for data management and whatever, if people is not able to use them, nothing will be really effective. And so we need a culture to manage these kind of tools and the related opportunities, and also to push back the challenges. But it's a joint effort. So the regulators should set the rules, the companies should provide all the information, transparency, and the I mean, technological tools available to users to control the technology. At the same time, users should be able to use them and should be educated to use them. If our users didn't use Google account as much they do, luckily, we would be in trouble. And I mean, this is probably one of the best-in-class set of technology to manage our personal data. Think of, I mean, less developed tools offered by other companies, or even companies that are starting to provide such kind of tools. So, to get a full exploitation opportunities, we need a joint effort of awareness, knowledge, skills, and culture that can be built only through a public and private level cooperation. Second pillar, very quickly, integrity. With big power, let's keep talking big because I'm here for Google, so it's in a way natural. With big power comes big responsibility. So companies should be responsible, should comply with the regulation. We have, regulation that are being exported all over the world. Let's think of GDPR, just to mention one, but also, as a former civil servant at the Italian regulator, let me also mention the great experience in liberalization of telecommunications here in Europe, thanks to the communications authorities, and I know how much you cooperate each other, and we heard from BEREC presidency and vice presidency how much this is effective. At the same time, transparency. The tools for transparency should be more and more enforced, and I do hope that in the current debate, but we'll hopefully have the opportunity to talk about this later, transparency tools should be a key element, also to overcome some problems with the definitions, with the obligations, with the safeguards, and so on and so forth. Transparency, in some along with education to use the tools, is key. At the same time, educational efforts. Once again, a joint cooperation of public and private players. I not recall here all the trainings and all the work that Google and other big companies do on that, but education is absolutely key for having people using privacy, security, and all the other tools they have at their disposal. And finally, almost finally, collaboration between, and regulatory dialogue, let's say, between public and private sector is the only way to have a real and effective impact analysis of the rules, and to take it on the ground, checking the real effect on consumer welfare, on user, on the quality of service, on security, on privacy. So it's very, very important that national regulators in particular are closely in touch, along with obviously the Commission, but national regulators are closely in touch with the industry, and with also all the academics, think tanks, and all the people working in the sector, to get a full understanding of the impact of the rules and their application. Finally, but we'll hear about that in a while, I think, technology. Technology as a tool for education, for sure, but also for regulation. In my other academic life, I've been dealing recently, for example, with the blockchain and smart contracts. I know that you lead amazing projects on applying blockchain to spectrum management, for example, and so on and so forth. I think that RegTech could be a really effective tool, but I know that we have experts here that are going to talk about that, so just to mention that technology can be a very effective instrument to contribute as a complement, along with others. Obviously, first of all, law and regulation is in the first place, but technology can be helpful to contribute to build a trusted ecosystem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. In fact, the EU's new digital rules aim at creating a safer and fairer online environment. And obviously, these rules will require engagement between policymakers and industry in order to ensure that they are effective. I'd like to invite Flavio to tell us a little bit more about what Meta is already doing, okay, particularly with technological tools, to ensure that its users are protected from harmful online content, for example.
Yeah. First of all, can you hear me? Just a quick check on this. Okay, so thank you, Antoine, and thank you all for this kind of invitation. This is a very important event, and I'm so sorry not to be with you in person. I hope to be able to come to Malta very, very soon. First of all, I want to congratulate the MCA on this very important 20th anniversary. And I think this event is also, the occasion to reflect on what happened in the digital world over the last 2 decades. In the digital world, 20 years count like a century or more in other traditional industries. For example, Facebook, now Meta, was founded in 2004, which means that we are 3 years younger than the MCA. And if you recall for a second how the world looked like 20 years ago, on the internet, you could already find all the information you were looking for. But what you couldn't find there on the internet back at the beginning of 2000 was people. And this has been our mission from day one. I mean, we say that we give people the power to build community and bring the world closer together. As you know, and as you mentioned, introducing me, and thanks again, we recently changed our name. We became Meta, as we are building the next generation's platform, paving the way for what we call the metaverse, which will be an open space which will represent the new chapter of interaction among people. We build, to your point, we build this path considering the protection of users and user safety and the protection of users from harm as our top priorities. As you know, with great inventions come often, unexpected issues. Facebook was no different. For example, over the last 2 decades, Facebook has had to act to address serious ethical dilemmas and, major societal issues. For example, how do we balance individual privacy with the needs of security? Or, and this is something we face on a daily basis, where do we draw the line between freedom of expression, which is recognized by the Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, for example, and harmful content? Or, again, how do we distinguish between what is truthful and what is a deliberately manipulative distortion? As a social media platform, we are often in the condition to make decisions on content that, to be honest, we would avoid to make. And that's why we asked for more regulation. We are fully aware that it's not a platform who should be in charge of these kinds of decisions. And first of all, again, to answer your question properly, let's start from the very basics. What is harmful content? Harmful content is something really, really different from what we call and we know as unlawful content. For unlawful content, making a decision is relatively simple, following the law or a decision taken by a court. On the contrary, a content can be considered harmful depending on a number of different factors. For example, the same content can be considered harmful or hilarious depending on some context. And this is really, really challenging for us to implement at scale. From our perspective, everything starts with our community standards, which establish what is and what is not allowed on our platforms. And I know that it can sound, a little trivial, but it shouldn't be underestimated how innovative and comprehensive these standards are. They cover, for example, violence and criminal behavior, safety, objectionable content, integrity and authenticity, intellectual property, and also content-related requests. And they are constantly evolving, published openly and in detail, and we report regularly on how they are enforced. And here again, I want to stress the importance of transparency and education, back to the point stressed by Andrea in his previous speech intervention. As I mentioned, our community standards enforcement reports are also submitted to independent audit, once again, because transparency is a core value for us, and in a certain way we are also, anticipating some of the provisions coming from the upcoming Digital Services Act. Maybe we have the occasion to discuss this in details in the next round of questions and answers. And in order to enforce our community standards, because of all the difficulties I was mentioned earlier, we use a combination of automatic tools based on artificial intelligence technology, which, as you all know, improves their performances with experience, and human reviewers. We need human reviewers because human reviewers are the only ones who can completely understand, and have this element of context, which I said are really, really important. We are fully aware that achieving an optimal solution is pretty impossible, and as many factors need to be taken into account, and content moderation is not an exact science. What we can do is doing better and better, and having more people to work on it, and having a more open process. Just to give you some example, our AI and machine learning technologies are having a big impact on reducing, for example, the amount of hate speech people see on Facebook. According to our latest community standards enforcement report, which was released, I think, like 10 days ago, its prevalence, it's about 0.03% of content viewed, which means 3 views of hate speech per 10,000 views of content. And the result is that content can be defined. The results means that hate speech has decreased on our platform by almost 50% over the last 3 quarters. Today we have 40,000 people, real people, human reviewers working on safety and security, and we have invested more than $13 billion in teams and technology in this area since 2016. In addition, our advanced AI has helped us block 3 billion fake accounts in the first half of this year. I believe that these numbers adequately represent Facebook's efforts to protect its users. I just want to stress 2 last points. One is that, as I mentioned, many decisions are extremely difficult and controversial. In particular, we are each day exposed to new challenges and new, let's say, threats. And that's why Facebook created an independent oversight board whose decisions are transparent and binding for Meta and for our product, services, and platforms. In particular, in addition, the decisions are not only binding, but the oversight board can also issue recommendations which help us improve our standards and make the experience on our platform always better. In conclusion, I just want to recall our general approach to misinformation. I think we don't have time here to go into details, but it's worth mentioning our 3-part framework. For example, we remove content that violates our policies. We reduce content that does not violate but are determined to be misleading, and on this we work with third-party fact checkers. And the third pillar, which is increasingly important, I would say, we direct people towards reliable information. This is what we did very extensively for the COVID-19 pandemic, and this is something we did also for example, the US election, building the center of information, both for the COVID-19 and the US election, a place where the users could find, reliable information to have all they could need for those important, occasions, and to face the pandemic with useful information.
Thank you, Flavio.
Yeah, that's it. And I just want to say the last sentence, just saying that this idea of keeping users safe will be our top priority as we approach also the building of the next platform, which we call the metaverse. Thank you all.
So we've heard how big companies employ significant resources, both human and technological, to ensure oversight against harms. But such challenges also affect regulators, who are also responsible for ensuring their own oversight, and particularly the regulators who come from small nations. And I'd like to invite Rainer to give us his insights on how small nations, like Malta and yours, can adhere to best practice regulation.
Thank you, Antoine. Thank you so much for having me. Well, I think we need to point out small is relative. With a nation of about 39,000 inhabitants and 150 square kilometers, Malta seems to be absolutely massive. But thank you so much for asking the question. Yes, being small, it always has challenges, but small is also beautiful. And I think the first rule for me is always stick to the basics. It was previously expressed as KISS, keep it simple, silly, or also Henry T. Ford recognized it very well, give them any color as long as this is black. When you're small, you need to know your limits. You need to be very prudent with your human resources, labor, capital, and also very important with the political goodwill. Because we need to recognize we are always in the triangle between customer, industry, and politics. That's our environment. In decision making, the big advantage in smaller nations is that the distances, literally and figuratively, are very short. For example, if I need to talk to my prime minister, I go down the road 500 meters, knock on his door, Daniel, you got time for a coffee. It's fantastic. You don't have this in a larger country. Like Malta, for example, it's more difficult. Also, what needs to be quite recognized, and here I'm quite happy that I worked in a couple of jurisdictions, in Austria, in Brussels, I worked also in the Middle East. It's very important to recognize that culture eats strategy for breakfast, always. You are always in a local context, you're always in a local political context, and what might work well in Malta will definitely not work so well in Liechtenstein. One size doesn't fit everyone. I think as a regulator, it's very important to recognize if you want to make everybody happy, sell ice cream. I'm not in the business of people pleasing. I'm in the business of regulating markets. And by nature, I cannot make everybody happy. But for me, it's very important that you have a clear decision making and you provide a path forward. I've seen it in my past very often that the regulator is trying to make everybody happy, is having a zigzag policy, and in the end, everybody loses. Because in the industry, if you know the regulator is always reacting like that, and even if you don't like it, you can get it in your risk map, you can get it in your business plans. If you have a regulator left, right, doesn't work. Also very important is, I think, to have a complete no-nonsense approach. Do what you say what you do. It's just good old-fashioned personal and professional integrity. Coming also back to a big quote from Teddy Roosevelt's foreign policy, speak softly, but carry a big stick. You need enforcement tools. Otherwise, you're a toothless tiger, which doesn't help anybody. And of course, those enforcement tools, they need to be a real threat. And the regulator, you must be independent, and you must not be afraid of using them. Consistency, of course, is key. Always do the same. Provide a path for the industry. What I've also figured out, of course, it's an old proverb, it's nice to be nice. Keep your information channels open. Adhere to the basic rules of diplomacy. Talk to everybody, even if officially you don't like them. At least have a coffee on the sides of the conferences. I think it goes without saying, evidence-based decisions are key. In order to maintain trust, regulators especially on the personal level, they need to be credible. Two last points. The first one for me is very important. Be courageous. For a civil servant, for an administration, it sounds counterintuitive. But our environment, we have heard it with Meta, we have heard it with Google. Those guys, they are so much faster than our civil service environments. And if you don't anticipate, if you don't jump ahead, or at least trying to keep up with the industry, we're just sitting ducks. Therefore, we cannot rely on what we have learned in the last 20 years of progress in the public sector. No. We need to jump ahead and sometimes do things which are maybe not very nice and which are not appreciated by everybody. The last thing is the human factor. For me, have a great team. That's absolutely paramount. And here I've seen it especially the contrast between Liechtenstein and Qatar. I'd rather have an excellent team with 10 and we get our things done rather than a mediocre of more than 100. And having had this experience in all those various jurisdictions, I'm fully convinced, and the industry will love that, is the public service should be very small and slim, but staffed with really good, really well-paid people which are committed to the public service, meaning serving the public, serving the industry, serving the constituency of the countries.
Thank you. So we've heard that we need to have effective enforcement tools and that we need to support our decisions with strong evidence. And I'd like to ask Fabiana, how can we harness technological innovation alongside the specializations of our people in order to contribute to better regulation?
Thank you, Antoine, and thank you, the MCA, for inviting me today to celebrate your 20th anniversary. This is really a honor for me. But I would like to start from the example that Meta just made regarding the self-regulation of harmful content. So he said basically that algorithms are essential in order to take down most of the harmful content, but at the same time he said that human presence is unsuppressible. Well, I think that this is really key to the future of regulation, because eventually algorithmic technologies and computational tools are key for the future of regulation. And because, as our friend Rainer just said, regulation must be up to date and cope with technology. And unlike most commentators who actually consider technology and algorithms mostly as a source of criticalities, I think that there are a lot of positive things that we can take from technology. And I hope I will have the chance to demonstrate, thanks to the research that we have been conducting on how to use computational tools and especially NLP technologies in order to improve regulation and also in order to improve legitimacy of regulation, and this without suppressing the presence of human beings.
Thank you. Andrea, within this context of extensive innovation, and again I link with my previous statement the need for resources in order to be able to deliver, how can we best ensure and safeguard that small to medium enterprises are also capable of catching up and are also capable of meeting compliance requirements whilst continuing to innovate?
Yes, thank you, Antoine. This is a crucial point for, for the whole set of upcoming digital regulation, but especially, obviously, for Mediterranean countries such as Malta or Italy and so on and so forth, where SMEs are key of economy and economic growth. The European Union regulatory agenda doesn't happen in a vacuum, and that's why events and efforts by regulators like this are key, as I mentioned before, because it's absolutely necessary to evaluate ex ante and in the implementation phase the impact on the whole economy and all the industry, including SMEs, on top of obviously the users and consumers. Let me mention very quickly one example that comes to my mind. That's the Digital Service Act package. In that context, there is obviously a huge debate. There are a lot of proposals, and there are some, issues that can impact in a way or another different kind of players. First of all, very quickly, one, gatekeeper definition. When I read Jeremy Rifkin's book, The Age of Access, I was impressed some years ago, including by the definition of gatekeepers that I even put at the beginning of my PhD thesis because I loved it. I was younger, and I didn't realize how much it was complex to apply and to understand really the scope of that kind of definition. For example, a company that can appear clearly as a gatekeeper at the first sight, in some services can be like that. If you look at not at the company but at the specific service, in some cases that same company is not clearly the gatekeeper, it's just lagging behind or growing in that kind of service. I could mention cloud as a market, as a particular kind of market, but AI and other kind of markets as well. So the size, and that's very important also for SMEs who want to grow, should be tailored according to the different services, and the definition are a big challenge ahead of the obligations. Very quickly, 3 examples to answer to your question. Obligation for online marketplaces, that's a big debate, and the need to know who is behind the transaction, the customers of the transaction in the online marketplace. So the question is, what is an online marketplace? Is the one in which the contract is concluded? I think so. Or it should be extended to all the kind of platforms. If it was like that, and all the possible platforms, not only the real online marketplace with the contracts concluded in that, are obliged to know who is behind, who is the customer, who is the seller, all the details behind. How can small and medium enterprises cope with that level of obligation? How could they could create a mechanism, could be able to build up a platform for online exchanges? Obviously, this would advantage the big players. And so SMEs would struggle a lot to become a platform, to connect people and sellers and buyers who want to get into a kind of relationship. That, especially when the relationship is not on that platform, but is on the website of the seller, for example. At the same time, close to that, some stakeholders ask for stay-down obligations. That's strictly related to what was mentioned before about machine learning control of content versus human one. Stay-down obligations, so action against illegal content, while on one hand, action against illegal content is crucial and all the platforms should comply with them, and put in place strong action against that, obviously. But at the same, when they are aware of the presence of that kind of illegal content on that platform, and that's part of the responsibility, being that big or smaller, but an obligation to ensure that a product is never re-uploaded would be troublesome for two reasons. One is could violate some fundamental principles, could become a sort of monitoring, because, could be enforced through machine learning, AI, and so on and so forth. But human check is still crucial, because technology can have fails. And at the same time, some content that are legal in a country could be illegal in another. Think of sport rights or betting products. So this kind of obligation can be troublesome. The same, super quickly to conclude, could be for proposals such as bans on personalized advertising, the pillar of the digital economy, personalized advertising. There are proposals in Brussels to ban personalized advertising. That's how the digital economy has been thriving in the last 20 years. And recommender system that are helping creators all around Europe to grow and to create their own platform. If we really think of that kind of limitation, that's not increased transparency. That's absolutely shareable as an approach. It's crucial that transparency is increased and companies should cooperate on that. But a ban could damage, first of all, not the big players, but the small and medium enterprises that have been growing and can keep growing, especially in this economic recovery situation, thanks to these kind of tools. So pay less for advertising, or recommend content to the users.
Rainer,
that's it.
In your experience, briefly, as regulator, some decisions have been taken in order to ensure that investments can be sustainable. Decisions like, for example, vertical separation, etc., etc. What are your views on the need for such decisions, and also maybe the impact that they can have on gatekeepers?
When it comes to sustainability, as a trained economist, I always say forward-looking, long-run concepts. It may be very expensive and politically not very popular in the short run, but it saves a lot in the long run. Maybe just a couple of words about Liechtenstein, and a heads up to the audience, there's going to be a question, so you need to pay attention. Liechtenstein, we are just 150 square kilometers, 40,000 inhabitants. We have 3 mobile operators, but 9 fixed net operators. And 1 gigabit is rapidly becoming the standard offer. Prices are about 65 euros a month. And Liechtenstein is also in a very unique geographic situation. We are one of the 2 double landlocked countries, meaning that neither the country nor the neighboring countries have access to the sea. Question to the public, who is the other double landlocked country? Uzbekistan. Why I'm saying this is due to this, we are also a bit of an insular environment, and we need to come up with our own solutions suiting our own country. Antoine mentioned it before. We are one of the countries where we have absolute vertical separation in the fixed network, meaning that the power grid is rolling out fiber optic cables. Next year we are going to have fiber optic everywhere. In the alpine areas, at the last cow stables, there's not going to be any digital divide. And this has 2 effects. The first effect is the economic effect, the long-run effect from the supply of sustainable services to the end customer. It's going to cost around 2,000 euros per household. The fibers are going to last for 50 years. And I always make the example if people say, well, 2,000 euros is a lot of money. My question is, what do you have in your life that you touch every day and is bringing you joy every day? Like a gigabit connection for 2,000 euros for 50 years. I think there are not too many things. That's the one thing. The second thing is, and here we come towards sustainability and also to the threat issue. What we figured out when the corona epidemic started, we had a call with the network operators twice a week to see how the networks are keeping up. They were fantastic. We had no issue whatsoever, 0, nil, nada. We were comparing this to the other countries, and there were some issues. And the issues in neighboring countries were when a service provider providing end customer services had to rely on input services, active wholesale services, we might call it bitstream or VULA, from other network operators. In Liechtenstein, every service provider is owning the whole value chain, the passive fiber, the active components, and also the ancillary services, meaning we have 9 fully independent fixed network providers, and giving the control over the whole value chain also contributed towards a sustainable service and no outages during the last 2.5 years.
Thank you, Rainer. In conclusion, we've seen that hard decisions need to engage really with a lot of stakeholders. And we need to ensure that we speak the correct language when we talk to these stakeholders to effectively secure good consultation outcomes. And I'd like to ask Fabiana to show us how her work in artificial intelligence is aiding the consultation and the legitimacy process.
Okay, so I would kindly ask to show the presentation. Oh, great. Thanks a lot. So, this is a project we have been doing with a small group of legal scholars and data scientists, and it has been published on the Stanford Computational Antitrust. Okay, so this is, as you know, the DSA and DMA are pushing forward new concepts, goals, and tools in order to harness a lot of problems, but among them those of the big techs. Okay, so the problem that we wanted to focus on is since there are so many new terms and new, how diffused is consensus among the stakeholders? And this is a key question, because what we wanted to check is that whether there was a consensus over introducing sort of new obligations over gatekeepers, or blacklist as a remedy, or even the very basic concepts on which the DSA and DMA are based on. To do so, we used computational tools. Specifically, we employed natural language processing and machine learning tools in order to analyze the feedback documents to the consultation over the DSA and the DMA proposals. So why using these tools? Because of the velocity that they provide, and they allowed us to scale up our analysis, and because we could actually read those documents in just few seconds, and also because of the ability to discern patterns that are normally not seen with what is called close readings or manual human reading. So why would we care about this? The reason why we should care about this is that, let me just make an example. The Commission actually concluded that all stakeholders wanted new rules for gatekeepers. However, this sounds like a consensus at first. However, How can we know that all participants are having the same platforms and practices in mind when the same terms and gatekeepers are still up to debate? So what we did is that basically we collected, I don't know why, okay. We collected all these documents and we created 3 different corpuses. And in these 3 corpuses, we collected 3 different corpuses and we grouped into 3 different groups, which is the first one is micro-organizations and individuals, then the second one is small organizations, and the third one is medium and big organizations. On this, we applied what is called word embedding modeling, and which allows us to actually see what is the use and understanding of those different words by the stakeholders. These are our results really in a nutshell, and we found significant differences in the way the different stakeholders use and understand very relevant words like gatekeepers, self-preferencing, or tipping, or even interoperability. And this is really relevant because while our analysis, while our analysis confirms what the Commission found as far as gatekeeper is concerned, it does not so as far as other concerns and other proposals are concerned. So take, for instance, the word newcomers, which is the counterpart for gatekeepers. It is interesting to see that it is associated with non-existence for small and micro entities, while it is associated with destroyed by the group of the big corporations, which of course may hint to very different outcome as far as the use of this. Or take, for instance, also self-preferencing. Even self-preferencing is, from our analysis, it comes out as being very, very differently used and understood. And this may cause a problem as far as Article 6 of the DMA, or even Article 12 and 29 of the DSA, which consist on reporting duties on rankings, are concerned. So, to recap, we found significant differences in the use and understanding for many terms in the DSA and DMA debate. And these findings are actually very relevant for several reasons. First of all, I think our methodology allows to identify different interpretations and also to prevent undesirable differences in implementation of those provisions that eventually require stakeholders to act. This can be applicable to different fields. Think, for instance, to the zero reading services, which is very common in the electronic communication sector. There is a real ambiguity in how to interpret and apply Article 3 of the network neutrality regulation. So an analysis of the kind that I just illustrated would be very helpful to identify how the different stakeholders actually consider and use this or would want to. Also, our analysis allows to identify different interpretation and eventually prevent different implementation, and that should be of interest for not only for the Commission but for all regulators before drawing conclusions from consultations. Thirdly, exposing hidden misunderstanding can enhance the quality of consultation process, but more generally, I think, rulemaking. I say that because a different understanding of legal terms may jeopardize their application by stakeholders, and therefore it may cause big reforms like the one we're talking about, we are discussing, to fail achieve their goals. And on a more general rulemaking level, I would say that unshared use and understanding of relevant term may puzzle the rulemaking. According to the Better Regulation Agenda of 2021, consultations are key to build consensus around new regulatory intervention. But if new terms are not consistently used, and can we say that consensus have been reached? And also, I would say, in terms of regulatory dialogue we were talking about before, I think that these tools could really help understand and better enhance participation, and therefore enhance also legitimacy of the regulatory product. And therefore, I would really, and this is really my last word, favor the use of computational tools by regulators in order to enhance participation by the stakeholders and therefore provide more room for a legitimate and use of technology without necessarily suppressing, as I said before, the human presence, which is essential. Thank you very much.
So we've heard that regulators can start off by ensuring that the language they're talking is understandable. Regulators can start off by ensuring that the language they're talking is understandable and to deliver better outcomes in terms of consultations by also harnessing technological tools and taking hard decisions. Likewise, in terms of what the big companies do. So we're concluding this morning's session. I hope it provided for an interesting and challenging debate. Thank you to all the speakers, please.